Well, hey, welcome back, Prosperity Collabs. Today's episode is one I've really been looking forward to filming for a while. Our guest today is Troy Shedeed. I hope I said that right, but you can correct me in a second.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was awesome.
And Troy is a real estate agent, but he also serves in leadership in ministry. He's been pastor of Generation Church. I think you planted it. Is that correct?
I did. It's been about 19 years, but I've been full-time for about 30 years.
All right, so there you go.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I'm passionate about in this industry is leadership and bringing experience from leading a community, growing a community. I'm very excited to get Troy's insights into that. And so without any further ado, we kind of already did this, but Troy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you asking me to be a part of this. It's my honor. And, we'll just give as much information and wisdom and years of experience that I have as possible.
There you go.
It'll be good. It'll be good.
Well, Troy, help the audience kind of catch up. What do we need to know about you?
So, born and raised in the good old state of Nebraska, stable foundation, stable family, cowboy, rancher, farmer, moved to California to become famous in movies, as everyone does, and settled in this little town called Mueller, California, and that was in 1987.
Oh, wow.
And proceeded to work on a horse ranch then, a horse race track, which all of this area was full of, and started going to the church, met my wife there, and felt, the tug of God to pursue that rather than my own exploits of Hollywood and fame. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the whole serving others became, started in our heart. And so moved to Oklahoma, went to ministry school, came back here. 1993, I'll probably end up sharing this story later, started to get my real estate license, but I was like 22, 23 years old. Mm-hmm. Back then, it was all book study and go to an office, and just thought, who's going to buy a house from this kid who doesn't even have a house or own a house, and kind of canceled moving forward in real estate. But I still had business in my heart, and so it was probably a few years later, got our first home, started moving forward, and about 7 years ago, I was watching the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and I said, God, what's going to be different this year? And he goes, finish what you started. And I had to go back and go, what the heck? Did I not finish? And all of a sudden, I had been investing in real estate, had rental properties, had land in Arizona with my dad, and I was just like, oh, yeah. So I logged on right there during the halftime of the Rose Bowl and signed up to do my real estate. Got going at, because now I had all this experience, but it was in a different way. I personally had done it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what started the journey. I was like, hey, if there's people I can help along the way, people in church or wherever, just acquaintances. So that's kind of my background. And then church, started church. I was the youth pastor here in the Temecula community for 11 years. Had the Union youth group back in the day. It was thriving. And then 2005, moved to, I didn't move, but we took over a small church in Moreno Valley. Mm-hmm. And it was not on my top 100 cities that I wanted to pastor a church. And so, but we took on the challenge and have succeeded. We now have 5 locations across Southern California, Mexico, and the other side of the world. And so I lead all the pastors and, really apostolically lead the movement, we call it. And so then I'm also doing real estate, and I also run the Amateur Players Tour of Southern California Golf Association. So I do that as well. You didn't know that part of me.
No, I did not know that. So when we were making jokes about Tyler Hungerford, friend of the show, pretending to play golf, that was real then,
That was real,
okay,
yes. That was real.
Nice,
I told Tyler, hey, I'll go help him with his golf anytime. So when I was actually in ministry school in Oklahoma, my best friend was a teaching professional.
Okay.
So he would go out with me and we'd play and he'd give me pointers. And so that's always kind of been my hobby, I guess, to go out and get away from things, is to go golf. And so then the national director for this tour asked me to take over the Southern California chapter. Mm-hmm. And so just did that over a year and a half ago, and just got back from Myrtle Beach at the national championships last night. And so here I am today. So.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So I think we'll probably talk about time management at some point.
Yes.
But, you mentioned a lot here, and give me a little more insight in the timeline. You moved. How old were you when you moved out to Murrieta?
I was 19 years old.
Okay. Yeah. And so 87, there was... the freeway had just gone through, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I remember Noggles was the thing back in the day.
Oh, yeah. My brother worked there.
So we would, I think the only stops stoplight in town was on Jefferson and Winchester right here.
Yeah.
And where I worked is now the Murrieta Police Department, Lowe's, Raising Cane's. That was our north pasture where the horses went.
Yeah.
On the other side of the road which is now California Oaks, was just grass.
Yeah.
And so I lived here back then and saw all this development, but I didn't know anything about, really real estate.
Sure.
Growing up in Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Totally
I know
world.
a big name in real estate in this area for years and years and years was Rancon.
Yeah,
Rancon Company.
Yeah, Dan Stevenson.
And they were the people who were here, basically.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
You saw their little horse logo everywhere.
Absolutely,
So,
Dan, and you go back, I remember around the turn of the century, 2000, my brother kept saying, you need to just buy something. I was, in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I could have bought something. I didn't buy something.
Yeah.
And now I go, I should have bought something.
Should have bought something. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, that's so I've got to see this whole community grow, and it's been interesting to watch, and so to understand real estate. Yeah.
Okay, so you came here, you're 19 years old.
Yeah.
You felt a call to ministry. You went into Oklahoma, did ministry school, came back here.
Yeah.
Why? Why did you come back here?
The church offered me. The youth, they offered me and my wife.
Yeah.
She was, Jennifer's her name. She was born and raised here in Temecula. They've lived here for so long, they used to go to Hemet to buy groceries.
Right, yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
So Old Town is where she grew up.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think one of the buildings now is where her grandma's house was. So we were offered the youth pastor position at the church we had come from, and so we came back, and we grew the youth ministry. We used to have 300 teenagers come out every Thursday night, and
which just knowing the history of the area, 300 teenagers at that time, that's something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, like percentage-wise, that's all of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We had something going on there, and so we would have world-class speakers come to our youth conferences, and it was a great time, and still have a lot of people that still associate with. We did a thing back then called the Nightmare, and it was a Halloween thing, and it was known through all of the community, and it was something that I put together, and it was really an amazing thing. I'm not sure, it used to be the old bowling alley over there, but we did a lot of work with that, and that was when our kids were little, and they grew up, and so that's kind of been our journey. So it was 2005 that then we began this drive to Moreno Valley to basically. Well, the church was going 14 years, but only had 20 people. So it was a rebuild. It was a remodel, and so that's what we did. And so it turned that around. So, they always say in church, when a new guy comes in, you lose 85% of those who are there. So my goal was to change that statistic, and I think I did a pretty good job. I still have people from that original church that are still a part of our church today. Yeah. And to me, that took leadership and direction.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, it's funny. In Jim Collins in Good to Great, right? He talks about how in any business that is the pivotal moment, right? That leadership change, that change from the founder to moving on to, it's paradigm shift, right? Yeah. And it's culture shift. It's all of those things. I mean, I think that's a good segue into leadership. You're doing a lot, right? Yeah. You're running multi-campus church. You're running, golf tour. You're selling real estate and taking care of people that way. I mean, so what like if I would say foundational principles or philosophy, like how are you coming at this?
Well, the truth is, you don't really see retirement or a full-time living in the future based on a pastor's salary. So at some point, I'm like, okay, I think Truffalo Dollar would disagree, but maybe
it depends on the pastor and the heart. Let's say that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe 1% can do that. Those who have mega churches and boards who give them nice salaries. But for the most part, if you're running a church in Moreno Valley, which is a blue-collar community, and I don't have a book that I'm selling or a tour that I'm on to help supplement an income that would help me through retirement, because unfortunately most nonprofits and churches do not have they don't have 401ks. Right. So I had to go, I don't want to continue in the way I'm going, and I had just turned 50, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or I was getting close to it or something like that. And I'm like, I've got to come up with some other way or think of some other thing. Well, real estate was something I was already doing. I just didn't have a license to maybe help others with it.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like where we dove off. I had tried other things. And so that's kind of how that happened. It wasn't because I was just like, oh, I'm bored being a pastor.
Yeah.
It was more of supplement our income.
Well, I mean, it's biblical.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Sure.
St. Paul was a tent maker, right?
Yeah.
And while he does write to the church and say, like, you need to pay people,
Right.
At the same time, he was out building making
Right.
tents,
Yep.
right? And so there's something to that to say there's a season,
Right.
And now
Yep.
I'm looking at this season going, okay, I need to go make some tents.
Well, I had
Yeah.
struggled, honestly, because I felt like if you were called to ministry, that was it. That's all you did. And because my dad was a business person, I felt like I had business inside me that I could do business, but I felt like that I might get pulled away from what I'm supposed to do, or it wasn't okay as a pastor
Totally.
to have a business. And then I got involved and started meeting other pastors who had all these businesses that were doing quite well for themselves, not because they were pastors, but because they had other businesses. And so then I'm like, so that was kind of like when the light bulb turned on. Yeah. So then I started going, okay, I need to break out of this really mindset that I had that basically capped me. So.
And I no knock on people like Rick Warren who have massive businesses that are like Rick Warren, right?
Yeah.
And I think he's done a lot of really good work. But with that said, going out and saying, I'm going to sell real estate to supplement my income.
Yep.
If you're going out to do ministry to supplement my income,
right.
It's hard. You really have to battle with that. Am I a mercenary or a servant?
Right.
Mentality.
Yeah.
And so I think to go say, I'm going to go sell real estate is to say, I'm not even going to struggle with that.
Right.
I'm going to go out and serve, and then I'm going to go make tents.
Right.
And, and I think it's a way, and again, it's a balance. Everybody's got to figure it out.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
It makes perfect sense to that.
Yeah.
So, but again, I think there's a reason that you see pastors who go out and they have these other businesses.
Sure.
Because, when you're pastoring a church, particularly like a church in Moreno Valley, there's no way you can do it all.
Right.
And the only way you can do it is if you can share that compelling vision, right? But then invite people into it in such a way that they're empowered to go do it. And oftentimes, I mean, you look at a healthy church, the people who volunteer for 40, 50 years. They work like employees.
Yeah.
But they're not working for me. They're working for that vision,
Yeah.
And what God has called them to. How do you, so obviously, what was the learning curve like for you in taking over a church and pastoring a church that way?
Well, the learning curve. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've had a natural leadership instinct, just a grace that God had on me.
Sure.
So it wasn't like I read the book protocols of how you do this or the formula for doing this.
Right.
I just felt like, relationship is key, not structures. And one of the things we did when we first took over the church is if I'm going to win the heart of these people who had a totally different style of leader before me, I was coming in as this 37-year-old dude from Temecula to Moreno Valley and taking over this church, which most of the people were older than me. And so one of the things I just did is I took every one of them to lunch one-on-one after church so that I could get to know them, they could get to know me, and began to develop. But then I also changed our style. So I had a band back then, and we did praise and worship, and it was more edgy, young type, stuff you would hear. And so I just said, hey, guys, we gotta bring it down 3, 4, 20 notches, because what they've been used to is just someone on a piano. And so I slowly just transformed things. In other words, not just throwing us at them and making them choke down what I was bringing, but allowed them to slowly. I always said this. I said, people don't like change, so I would say, hey, we're going to try this. And I think that's a good leadership principle for people to, hey, we're going to try this. It might work. It might not work. But what you're really saying is we're going to change some things.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
but without using the word change, which freaks people out. So we did that.
And as a leader, how do I, there's this tendency if you're okay, the hardest job in the world is a substitute teacher in a kindergarten class,
Absolutely.
right? Because you're not Mrs. So and so,
Right? Yeah,
and that's not the way she does it.
that's right.
And honestly, we're all just a bunch of kindergartners. So a new boss comes in, new pastor comes in, and you go, hey, well, we're going to do all these great things I'm really excited about, and they go, well, you're not Mrs. So and so, and it's there's almost a subconscious, I can't like you, because if I like you, I'm betraying the person who was here, and it sounds like the way you met that was, I'm going to bring change without telling anybody, making anybody feel like they were wrong or they're betraying anything, or we're just going to keep, moving forward.
I think the people, it was a little easier, I would say, for me. One, it was a smaller group of people. Number two, they were desperate for vision. Mm-hmm. And that was probably part of the reason that it was just a small church after 14 years. And so, unbeknownst to me, I came in and said, hey, in 2 weeks, we're moving over to this new building, which was a middle school. And I got them out of this elementary multi-purpose room that no one even knew was stuck in behind all these houses. Mm-hmm. And so I moved us over there. I'm just like, if we're going to grow this thing, we got to be more visible. We got to have a bigger facility. We got to have all this stuff. And so I did it in 2 weeks. Well, unbeknownst to me, I took one of these families to lunch, and they go, do you know that our old pastor has said for 2 years we should move over to this other school? And he goes, in 2 weeks you did it? So that immediately, and then on the first Sunday we had church, we had a couple young people give their life to Jesus. Well, someone else said, it's been 5 years since we had anybody give their life to Jesus, which those are scary things for me because I was, disappointed with just two, and they were ecstatic with that.
Right.
So just those two things helped that I didn't even do on purpose. It was just part of leadership within me that gave these people vision, gave them like, hey, we're going somewhere. Yeah. Actually, in that time, we were probably 50 people, right? Took one of these couples to lunch, and they said, hey, we just need to let you know, Pastor, that we're probably going to move on. We want to be a part of a small church. We don't want to be a part of anything big. And I'm thinking to myself in the back of my head as we're sitting at lunch, I'm buying them lunch, how much smaller do you need the church to be? Like, we are less than 50 people. Yeah. But what I heard from that was they already saw my vision, and they already felt what my capabilities were. Right. Even though we had not yet gone there, they knew that's where we were going, and that's not what they wanted to be a part of. Yeah. So I knew my message was getting across, and I knew there was a vision casting that was happening. There was a grace upon me to have it become something more than it was, and people knew it already. So that helps. Okay,
there's two things I want to underline here. There's one, without vision, the people perish. Yeah. Right. It's not just in the church, but it's in industry. Right. And as a leader, if I'm not casting a big enough vision, no one can buy into that. And if I'm running a real estate team and I'm not casting a vision, then they're just showing up to work. Yeah. And as human beings, we know we were created for more, right? Yep. Inherently, whether you're a person of faith or not. I don't think there's any little kid who says, someday I'm going to work in a cubicle. Right. But they may go work in a cubicle, and they may be really happy about it and really involved if they feel like the cubicle makes them part of a bigger vision, right? And so communicating that was important. Yeah. The other piece, and I was just teaching branding yesterday, and building your brand online is building your reputation, and it's building trust. And the fastest way to gain trust is to just do what you said you would do. Yeah. Right. And it sounds like you came into a scenario where people were starting to lose trust if they hadn't, because, hey, we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. It never happened. And then you came in and you did it, and they're like, oh, we can trust you. Yeah. And if we can trust you, we can go on the journey with you. Right. Because you can cast as big a vision as you want, but if people don't trust you, they're not going to go on the journey. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think it's, that's not just church. That's a real estate team. Right. Right. Why do I want to give you 50% of my commission? Right. Does that make sense? Yeah. And work for you. Well, if we're doing something bigger, if I'm part of something bigger, if I'm building something, or I'm part of a movement, it means something. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, in church, that's kind of easy because the movement was set for us, go therefore. Yeah. Right. In a real estate team, we got to think about it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Right. What is our bigger purpose? So I love that. Yeah. Churches are mission driven. We just kind of touched on this. How would you counsel a business leader to communicate vision like that? I mean, how would you counsel them to discern that, that sense of purpose within their team and their organization?
Well, I think you got to have the direction where they're going. Most of the time, business owners, they're about how can I grow the business so I can grow my pocketbook.
Yeah.
And we got to go, hey, all these people working are trying to feed their families and do their thing, and so there's got to be buy-in. And so I think having that core value that you communicate. For example, I do this analogy with our team all the time is helping them, see where we're going. We have a statement, we're more than a church in a city, we're a movement to the world. Mm-hmm. So that gets us out of our individual box into there's a bigger purpose before us. And I think having people have a belief in what they're doing will change behavior. And I think sometimes we don't like some of our maybe employees or those working with us, their behavior, but behavior is not the issue. It's the belief. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like with parenting with kids. We want to change their behavior. Well, they might say okay or yes or whatever one or two times, and they can adjust their behavior. But if you don't ever get to the root issue, which is their heart or their belief system, then you won't have the outcome that you're looking for. So when you're there, their behaviors are right. But when you go away as the leader, if they don't believe in it, then mm-hmm. their behavior will change. Yeah. And so they've got to have a belief in what they're doing. And so that's, to me, one of the key things. Whether it's in real estate, business, or whatever, people have to buy into the belief that I'm a part of something bigger than just showing up and clocking in, mm-hmm. that there's value in me, purpose in me, that people are doing things in excellence. And I think that's sometimes we can lose that. We just want them to do the job, mm-hmm. Well, they got to have a value or a belief in why am I doing this job? Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's just becomes monotonous and they start looking for something better. Yeah. Not because there is maybe something better, but because they don't believe in the company or the mission or the values of what it stands for, because it's all just going to the one guy or whatever.
I think in leadership with adults, it's hard because as adults, we've gotten really good at saying, okay, you're right. No, you're right. And I think it's never split the difference, or maybe it's start with no, I don't know, one of those books. But he says if you're in a conversation with someone, and you're having a great conversation, they're going, yeah, you're right. No, you're right. You leave thinking, man, I really got through to him. He said you didn't. But if they're saying that's right, then you got through to them, right? And I think there's no greater training ground for that than an adolescent child. Yeah. Right? Because an adolescent child will tell you, oh, you're right, but they will tell you, no, you're not. But as adults, we've learned to mask that face. Right. So we can be telling you, you're right. And we're basically telling you can go, and so you have to be willing to ask the question behind the question. Yeah. Or to get past that to like, how do you buy into this? Right. Mm-hmm. How do we do this in a way? And I think, it was maybe Gary Keller was in a leadership training with him. And he said, like, if you are aligned with the goals of the people in your organization, then they're going to stay. Yep. Because if you're as invested in getting them to where they want to be as you're expecting them to be invested in where you want to be, then there's trust, right? Yeah. And then that vision makes sense. But if it's just my vision, and they're like, yeah, but what about me? Right. Again, you're using people. Right. And you can do that in church as well as you can do that in business, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that comes down to culture. Mm-hmm. and chemistry, and it's important with that great chemistry requires maturity of people, and sometimes not everyone is mature. There's two types of maturity. There's relational maturity, and then there's emotional maturity. And so sometimes if we don't understand that, then we won't have a great chemistry. And then so we come into the office and it's crickets, or there's just tension in the air. Well, that's chemistry, that's vibe, that's the feeling in the office. And so sometimes that right there is a person that, well, what's in it for me, right? Because at the end of the day, sure, they want the company to grow or whatever, but at the same time, they're like, what's in it for me? Where am I going to be in 10 years? Where am I going? So we've got to create that chemistry, that culture within the context of the business that changes things. So, in church, we have what we call a team huddle, and we have our vision statement that we all say, and then serve for souls on 3. So it's become our culture. So I can be there or not be there, and things happen the same.
because we've created a culture that it's not about me, but it's about what we're creating as a team of people, a group of people. So when people grab a hold of that, then and they realize it's just not about the one person, but it's about what we're all doing together, then the heart changes, which is the belief system. Then the behaviors change. Yeah, and so that's key, I think. So
yeah, I love what you said about the huddle and the mission statement, and then your kind of chant, right? The ritual, I guess. Yeah. Because there's everybody knows, as a leadership team, we're supposed to have a huddle, right? We're supposed to have a mission statement. You know what I mean? And but having a mission statement doesn't mean you're in mission.
Yeah,
right?
No, absolutely. They can say it by memory, but then they can walk out. So one of our things is, serve with a smile. Right. Yeah. And when people walk down the hallway, they already got a frown on their face. So you can quote stuff, but until it becomes real to you, or you believe in it, or that there's a why behind it, that's when you take ownership. And ownership is different than the renter, as we all know. So,
right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think this sort of segues into servant leadership, right? Yep. Because again, the mission statement doesn't mean we're in mission. And the mission statement doesn't become real until I see it lived out in the leadership. Yeah. And more often than not, if he's not living out that servant leadership to me, then I know he's full of it on the mission. Right. Oh, we're here to serve the families of Marietta and create home ownership for underprivileged communities, all these things. And you're like, but you are a money grubbing jerk. You know what I mean? Like, right. Nobody believes it, right? Yeah. So in church, we talk about servant leadership. In business, we talk about servant leadership. I imagine as a real estate agent, your clients are seeing servant leadership. Yeah. What does that look like? What does that look like as a leader? What does that look like as a real estate agent? Yeah.
Well, I think it's important. Servant leadership obviously is action, and some people can say a lot with their mouth, but then they don't follow up with action. And I say, whatever's in your heart, you will see in people's actions. Like it will manifest. In other words, it's just not something they're talking about, but it's something that they're doing. So I know years ago, I don't really do this anymore, but churches used to have me come in and consult them on how can I improve my church, or what can we do different. And so my job would really be to point out the problems, or see or identify weaknesses that the current pastor couldn't see because he had got so used to the normal flow. Yeah. And so I could come in and, sort of point out the problems. But the challenge is consultants can see it, but the owners have to fix it. And then you have to help an owner fix it or see it. And so servant leadership is really getting people to take ownership of the business, of their role, of a church, of whatever it is. And so that's seeing that through servant leadership because they get it and they own it rather than they just point out the problem. I had a church person, I'll just say years ago, as I was talking to people as they were exiting, and the person said, hey, the kids, I don't know if you know this, Pastor, but the kids were playing this certain video game back in the children's room, and I just don't appreciate da-da-da-da-da. So she was telling me, as someone who felt like she had a voice to say something, that she didn't appreciate something we were doing. But I'm like, this is the problem with most church people in America, in my opinion, is we've taken on a consumer mentality. Like if I go to Chick-fil-A and I don't like what they did to my chicken, I'm going to say, hey, this was not hot like it's supposed to be. Because you're a consumer and you're saying, I want a different product. But churches are supposed to be members who are all in it together to create a great experience for all people. It's not a consumer mentality where you come and point out the problems to the pastor and you expect him to fix everything. Like church is supposed to be team, not one person, because we're all called. And so this is where we often find times with challenges with businesses is people come in and they point out the problem, but then they always expect just the owner to fix it. But when you can get your team to start fixing things, when they get to the root issue of why it went that way or why the system broke down or why the structure broke down, and then they take ownership to fix it, then you've started to create a culture of that we're all in it together. And I remember a great speaker one time says, hey, I have enough problems, bring me solutions. Yeah. In other words, everybody's always bringing you the problems. Great. How are we going to fix it? Right? Yeah. So they want the owner to fix it, but I'm going to tell you all your problems. Yeah. But when you can get the team to start fixing it, rather than the owner having to deal with it, then the company can grow and you can go beyond because now the owner can focus on vision and where we're going as a company, and the people who work for it are handling the issues and fixing things. So,
Yeah.
to me, that is, servant leadership, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
No, I love it. It's I oversee a couple large real estate brokerages, right? And there's some corollaries to this because people say, oh, well, we should have this.
Right.
We should do this, which really means you should do this.
Right.
And I always say, it'd be so much more powerful if you did that.
Yeah.
Right? Like I could tell everybody, hey, we got role play groups this morning.
Yeah.
But if you did it, it means more than me. Right.
Yeah.
And so the other day we were in a training and somebody says, you know what, I really want to get together and do role play in the morning or whatever it was. But then they started planning it. And I thought, all right, this is a turning point, right? It's not you should, it's we're going to,
Yep.
And as a leader, that takes a lot of trust too, right? Because there's, if everybody's not in vision, then you can end up having multiple kingdoms that claim to be part of the same, but it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes down to the question of empowering people.
Yeah.
Right? How do you balance empowering the people on your team with, hey, we're going this way, right? How do you guarantee or oversee or control? I don't know if that's even the right word. Because again, we're going this way. Oh, right. So we're going to go do this, and you're like, what on earth? That has nothing to do with what we're,
right.
or that is the opposite direction of what we're going.
Yep.
So how do you empower people without losing the vision?
Yeah. So I'm a big systems guy, and so I believe that sometimes we can have a great vision, but people don't know how to help us execute it because we don't have a system in place. We don't have like think about Amazon. Like I sat down one day and was just like, holy cow, the processes and systems and management and all the pieces that they got to have in place for us to complain because we didn't get our package in 2 days. It took 3.
Yeah.
Like all the things that how that machine has to work. Well, then we maybe don't have those same processes in our own businesses and simply in church. And so I've seen this a lot in churches just because how I think is a little bit more unique than others. And the pastors can complain about church growth or, finances or whatever. I went to this one church one time as a guest, and they did the offering thing, and they only had one way of giving finances to an offering or whatever, and technology had changed, and we had 5 different ways, and texting was one, or using your phone was one, and all these different things. And so sometimes the very thing we're complaining about is because we haven't created the systems to help us accomplish our goal. So if they had put in systems of you can text in your donation, or you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this, it gives people more avenue, because you just don't have people walking around with cash in their pockets anymore because everything is technology or credit cards. And so you're wondering why the offerings aren't. It's because the systems you have are not helping you move where you want to go. So same with your team. If they don't know who's in charge or what's supposed to happen, you can get frustrated all you want in your business, but maybe you haven't put the systems in place for it to succeed, to go to the level you need to, because people don't know what they're supposed to do. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things. And so in order to do that, you have to empower those around, and you only give power or release that authority to those who understand your core values, understand what your purpose is, where you're going. They have buy-in, and then they know, and then they're transferring it to another person. In other words, I had a great mentor, and maybe he'll come up later. He says, if you don't train those to understand your vision, your purpose of where you're going, you'll get 2 or 3 levels down, and you'll come into your own church one day and not want to be there yourself because the culture changed. And he goes, so you've got to make sure that your culture is being communicated 2, 3, 4 levels down, because they're the ones that are communicating culture to the next line, not you anymore. When you start a company, it's just you and the 10 guys around you, and they all get it. But 3 or 4 levels down, if you have not communicated your vision or your culture correctly somewhere, you can tell somebody, hey, the little red chicken crossed the road, and by the time it gets around to the 15th person, the whole story has changed. So you've got to create that. And so if you do that, then you can release authority, because you know that they get it and you can trust them. So like just this last week, I was in Myrtle Beach all week. Well, everything was happening. I didn't have any questions or concerns, because everybody knows their roles, everybody knows their responsibilities, and everybody knows my expectations. great friend of mine once said, expectation and reality, the farther those are apart, the greater conflict you have.
Mm-hmm.
So as a leader, this is our expectation, and in reality, this is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
The closer you can get those together, the less conflict.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we have conflict, and it's because maybe our employees or those around us in reality don't know what our expectations are of them. We just voice them to our wives at home, or voice them to our closest friend. I can't believe this person did it. And they don't even know that's an expectation of ours, right?
Yeah.
So then we have conflict. And then that causes culture not to be there. Then you have toxic environments. And sometimes it's just our expectations are not clearly communicated.
All right, I got to take a highlighter at a couple things. I love this lesson of, if I go into a teacher's lounge, I'm going to hear a repeating theme of the parents of the problem. If I go into real estate brokerage and I talk to leadership team, I'm going to hear a recurring theme of the agents of the problem. If I go to an agent, I'm going to hear a recurring theme of the clients are the problem. Right. If I'm in a team, it goes, and you go round and round. And if you're really a leader, you have to stop and look and go, I'm the problem.
Yeah, I'm the problem.
I'm the problem, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm the problem. Or what am I doing that's the problem, right? And I love what you said about we're so quick to tell our wives about it, right? Or complain to each other. But how often do we stop and sit down with that person and say, hey, I feel like we might have a problem in a non-confrontational way. Or so I love that. I also think, I want to underline the idea of every system is perfectly designed to get the result that it's getting.
Yeah.
And if it's not getting the result you want,
it's because you don't have the system.
You didn't design it right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And so to just keep running and yelling and being upset or frustrated isn't, well, okay, hold on. Where's the breakdown in the system? Is it too complicated?
Yep.
Is it just not understood? Right? Is it the wrong person running it? Because every system's perfectly designed to get the result it gets.
Yeah.
And, so I think that's really important. And again, if my job as the CEO is to cast vision, am I empowering the people who are working for me to cast vision? Am I making sure they're casting vision? Am I inspecting what I expect from them? And could I talk to anybody, anybody in my church community or any employee in my business, and do they know what that vision is?
Right.
Because if they don't, it's just another thing we slap on the wall.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's really important for real estate agents who are looking into leadership, or if you're just running a single agent business. The system's getting the result it's designed to.
Yeah.
Are you clear about your mission and your vision? Could your clients tell you what it is?
Right.
Because if they can't, it's not the culture of your business.
Right. It's too complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or it's just not being lived out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot of application there. So yeah, man, thanks. I really appreciate that. Real estate's a service-driven industry.
Yeah.
And I touched on servant leadership. I don't want to. I think we have to acknowledge here that you're selling real estate at a high level. You're managing a golf tournament. You're which I didn't know about. You're running a large church in multiple locations, and service is at the heart of it. Servant leadership. How does that? I mean, again, we talk about it the way you mentioned is empowering it. But if I did a transaction with you, where am I seeing that? What's the distinguisher where I'm seeing a servant heart lived out in that transaction?
I think mostly I kind of have three values: excellence, doing everything in excellence, communication, and care. And I think if a client doesn't feel like I care and I'm just a number to them, then that's a problem. I think communication is critical because most people, let's just say most people, it might be their first real estate transaction and they don't know what's supposed to happen. They don't know what this abbreviation is or anything like that. And because it's day-to-day operations, maybe for a real estate agent or a brokerage, for a client, communication is critical. What do I do next? And what does this mean? And who's this escrow person? And why did they contact me? And all this stuff type of thing. And so I think communication and then excellence. And so if I can take all the pain and all the stress away from the client, then I have servant led them because I'm doing things above and beyond. So or even helping them get the home ready or give some tips or things like that. In other words, I'm not just the sign in the front yard. Right, but there's more to it that they look back and go, man, I had a great experience working with this agent because they serve me in multiple ways. They helped me get people in and out of the house. They told me every time someone was coming, because, you know, you have different people. They want to know every time someone's coming in, and another person could care less. They're just like, hey, whatever, just get this thing sold, right? So, you know, I think that that's when people would feel, they'd feel like, you know, we cared, that we did things in excellence, and that we communicated with them efficiently. Ultimately, what's the client looking for? The bottom line is the dollars, right?
Sure.
I either made the most money because this guy did a great job, or I got the best deal at buying this house, right? So those are the things that they're going to look at, but I think they should feel the effort of the individual as well. So I've had so many people tell me, "Thank you for answering your phone." What does that mean? That means that most people aren't answering their phone. What is that? That's communication.
Yeah.
What is that? That is care.
Yeah.
So I get that a lot. Thank you for answering your phone.
Yeah. You know, servant leadership, we look to Christ, right?
Yeah,
if you're a Christian, you do.
Yeah.
I am, you are.
Yeah.
And I don't see in Christ's life a lot of complaining about the stuff he did for me. You know what I mean? And so you mentioned I'm getting through the process. I'm trying to make it stress-free. I'm answering their questions. I'm handling all that stuff. And I'm not griping and complaining and having that like, oh, crazy client, you know what I mean? Like, and if I'm really truly trying to serve, I'm going to step in front of it, and they might not know about it until after, or maybe never, but they're definitely not going to feel like I'm annoyed by them. Right. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's, as you were talking, that was sort of the image I got, you know, was, I'm standing in front of it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, if they have done a real estate transaction before, maybe the servant experience that you gave them would be defining between maybe their previous experience and what you're now doing. So, you know, everybody's, you know, a little different in how they see that happening, but that would be my goal at least. So, yeah. I
think it's not, I mean, again, this is a lesson for leaders looking to build teams or run organizations too.
Right.
If I'm a servant leader, again, I'm not, we go back to the teacher's lounge or the, you know, the boardroom or whatever. I'm not griping about the people that I have the honor to lead. Yeah. You know what I mean? And if I ever want to check my servant heart, if I am a servant leader, it's, man, do I approach this as I have the honor to lead these people? I have the ability to influence their lives. I have the ability to bring life, you know, or is it, you know, like, and it's constantly looking to bring them down rather than lift them up, right? Or even just to complain about it. You know, I think anytime you're complaining about somebody, you realize, I've stopped serving them.
Yeah, that's
true. And look at, I mean, take it to marriage, right? Right. And you probably have had the opportunity to sit with couples who are going through struggles. Yeah. And a couple who's fallen into that habit of complaining about each other or talking about each other, or, you're in road to trouble. Yeah. It's because you've lost your servant heart. Yep. Right. Absolutely. And you're like,
yeah. The greatest deficit or the greatest destruction to most marriages is communication is when people become self-centered. And that's when a marriage won't work, is when one person's only thinking about themselves and what am I getting out of the deal rather than team and partnership. And so, you know, self-centeredness, you know, they say, well, sex, money, or all these things are the downfall of marriage. No, it's selfishness.
Absolutely.
Because you don't go after those things until you start just looking at what am I getting every time, rather than what you're giving. Giving is serving. And you're supposed to, until death do us part in marriage. And so you're serving, you're looking out for the person. And as followers of Christ, Jesus said, I came to serve, not to be served. And so if we keep that heart and attitude, and you bring that into business, you bring that into real estate, then I think, you know, most people will do much better than the person that's self-centered. So,
well, it's interesting because you had mentioned in church, like the greatest danger is that consumer mentality, right? But the metaphor that Christ uses most often to the church is marriage, right? And it's exactly that, right? Like if I'm just here to be served, that's going to be an ugly culture, right?
It's not going to be good.
And I think, again, it's a lesson that business can take from the church. I don't care where you are on the ladder. If your mindset is they owe me, it's not going to be good.
Not good.
You know, and I talked to my son who's in his 20s about that, right? No, your mindset has to be, what else? What else can I do? How else can I provide value? How else can I serve? What else can I do to improve the situation? And as a leader, if that's my mindset, how can I make my life, my people better? You know, as an employee, as a realtor, you know what I mean? But and obviously church and marriage. But I think these are lessons that they're bigger. Again, the church should set an example of healthy leadership.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that. All right. Leadership. You're obviously a leader, but part of success in leadership is identifying leaders.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to build something that goes on beyond you,
Right.
or you want to be able to go lead the golf tournament, you have to be able to find and empower leaders.
Yeah.
In business, it's the same, right? And one of the things I consult agents on is leadership and building teams. I think the hardest step a lot of times is the first hire. It's identifying somebody that you can empower to grow with you, right? How do you identify leaders?
Well, again, comes down to a system.
Mm-hmm.
So we have checks and balance. We have a lead team that something I've learned, and I learned this from one of my mentors, Sam Chand, is that some people are organizational leaders and others are functional leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because someone shows up every day, shows up on time, and they stack the boxes or do whatever, and wow, they're really great. They show up and they do what they're supposed to. Well, maybe they're a functional leader, but then we say, we're going to put you over this department. Mm-hmm. And then they begin to fail us because they don't know how to lead others, but they do know how to do the function. And so we have to train someone how to be an ownership or an organizational leader prior to removing them from a functional leadership role. Because if this is my function and I just show up and I clock in and this is what I do every day and it's repetitive and this is what I can do that. Mm-hmm. But now you're wanting me to put out fires, you're wanting me to email a team, you're wanting me to communicate with others, and my skill set may not be able to do that. And then we get disappointed at their performance when we make them an organizational leader versus a functional leader. So you've got to be able to equip them and train them into that role before releasing them into that, or they will fail. They will feel like they're a failure, and they will fail everybody around them. Mm-hmm. Because some people are A-type personalities, and they can see the administration, and other people are very, just life of the party person. They're great relationally, but when it comes to system, it frustrates the daylights out of those that are system people. And so you have to be able to, identify those. And the only way to identify them is as you bring them through the team, their giftings will be revealed. And so I'm pretty good at seeing people's gifts and then going, they got what it takes to do this role or that role and take us to another level, because some people are just really great with people, but they're terrible at organization. Mm-hmm. And other people are really great at organizing, but they make everybody else ticked off because they're so mean, right? Yeah. So we've got to figure that out. So, when the water level rises in the harbor, some boats are going to go with it and some boats are going to sink. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be able to identify what those are, and you got to be able to raise their leadership potential to rise with it, because when your business starts to grow, those who started with you, they might not be able to handle the rise in productivity, the rise in pressure, the rise in a growing organization, and they'll start falling off because they couldn't go. But they might be really good in this position. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we don't need to dismiss people. We just need to reassign. Right. So either reassign or retrain. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are key things, because maybe they don't have the capabilities to do that next level, but they can be retrained to do something different. So I think, structure and helping people grow into leadership is key, because some people just aren't trained today. And so you got to see the gold in them and help, chisel it away before you see it, in my opinion, proved out. So
I think there's some real wisdom in that, because just because you were excellent at what you're doing doesn't mean that translates to running the department. Right. You know what I mean? Like exactly. I was the best, transaction coordinator there was. Yeah. Doesn't mean I can run a team of transaction coordinators. Right. Right. And I think it's hard. I've said this to people when they're going through transition or they're stepping into a leadership role. I've got a leader I'm mentoring right now, and we hired her because she's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. She's really, really good, but this is a new experience for her. Mm. And one of the things I got to remind her is it's really hard to go from being the best in the world at what you do to feeling like you suck at something. Right? Right? Yeah. But you can't be the best in the world at something unless you're willing to suck. So let's just get, we're going to get through it, but it's okay if you're frustrated. Yeah. It's okay if you're like, I feel like I don't know anything, because you don't. Yeah. And that's actually a good attitude. Yeah. Because now you can learn. Yeah. But high achievers, it particularly if you're an adult, we're not programmed to learn how to ride the bicycle again.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're moving from, I was really good, I got this promotion because I'm really good, and now I'm stepping into this role and I'm bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as leaders, you got to have the wisdom to know they're probably not going to be excellent at it if you're moving them up from something else into this.
Yeah.
Now, if I hired from another organization and they had a track record in leadership and they've been running departments, then I'm going to expect them to come in and hit the ground running. But if I'm hiring from within and I'm bringing someone up, then I have to teach them how to think.
Yeah.
And that's a reframing of neural networks.
Right.
It takes time, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you said that, the skill set piece.
Yeah.
I think we miss that a lot. And it burns relationships.
Yeah.
It hurts culture.
Yep.
Because if you've got somebody who was really well loved and you promote them and you don't support them and you don't give them what they need to succeed, then everybody else goes, man, that person got screwed over.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it hurts the team. It hurts the morale.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a lot of wisdom in that. Yeah.
I was just in Myrtle Beach at our national championships for the Amateur Players Tour, and so the first 3 days was the open, meaning anybody can participate. And I was on one of the teams that ran one of the tournaments at an event. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't the guy director of it, but I worked with 3 other guys, and there was one guy. So our experience the first 3 days was phenomenal. He said, hey, you're doing this, you're going to do this. And we had a little chat in the texting, and he was communicating, and it just ran smooth. Everybody knew. But then he also knew that we were also all equal. We all knew what we were doing. And so he empowered us and he released us and just expected us to be a part of the team. And then the next 3 days, I was on a separate team running the senior national championships. Mm-hmm. Totally different experience for me. Mm-hmm. I was also on this one team, but this particular guy was micromanagement. Mm. This particular guy, instead of saying, hey, can you go do this for me and I'm going to go do this, he would just go do everybody's job. Mm-hmm. And then we were all standing around going, what do you want us to do? And then he wouldn't respond in the text and he wouldn't communicate. And it was sort of this frustrating experience that if these were 2 companies, one I would want to work for, the other I would not. But even though I was at the same event doing the same systems, and I was doing the exact same job, but the guy that was leading was a totally different experience. Right. And so I think, that's part of, because there are certain peoples that you got to do it this way, and sometimes maybe someone does it better than you if you're willing to learn. Mm-hmm. And it'll cause the company to be better. And then there's others who just have to have their hands in everything, and that causes people to feel like they don't trust me, mm-hmm. they're not empowering me, and I maybe need to find somewhere else to go. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So.
Well, I honestly, I think that's the difference between a leader.
Yeah.
Right? Because the leader understands that the vision is something you invite people in.
Yeah.
Right? You're a steward of it, but you don't own it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not yours. It belongs to the group. Mm-hmm. And sounds like, the thing I think about is I wonder what the experience was of those 2 leaders. The one probably had a great day.
Yeah.
Right? Really enjoyed the whole thing. The other one probably went back and said, these people are idiots.
Exactly.
Nobody did anything.
Anything. Yeah. Yeah. I had to do everything.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was all communication.
Right. You didn't empower them.
Yep.
Okay. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. I want to talk about success.
Yeah.
Because, there's different ways to measure success. Now in church, I think there's a challenge because we're not looking, obviously we got to balance the books. We got to be good stewards of the finances. We have to do all those things, but the metrics are different, right? And you'll hear people in church say, well, as long as we reach one person. And I think there's some truth to that, but there's also the truth of you only reach one person. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a little bit, business, we define metrics different ways too. What would you say to a business leader who is struggling with defining the metrics of success, right? And I just had a conversation with our national team about this. How do you know if that system works, right?
Yeah.
How do you know if you need to give up that system?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you define success? How do you counsel a leader in defining success? Obviously, there's the metric side, the numbers, but then there's also the intangibles,
Yeah, I would say, probably some of the greatest compliments I get sometimes is when people from the church, per se, will come and say, man, this thing, you weren't even here the last 2 Sundays, Pastor Troy, and this thing ran like a machine. Mm-hmm. It is so awesome to see everybody. Well, what is that? They're basically saying that when the boss isn't there, mm-hmm. everything continues on. To me, that's success. Mm-hmm. To me, that's winning. For example, the CEO of Disney or Disney World or Disneyland or whatever, he doesn't have to be at Disneyland for people to have a Disney experience.
Yeah. Everything
functions and operates. In other words, I like to tell people, hey, everybody keep your head on.
Yeah.
And so we have this whole illustration at our church that they totally get, because when you go to Disney World or Disneyland, you see Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and Pluto and all the characters, and they all have their head on, mm-hmm. which is a costume. We all know. We don't see Mickey Mouse going around on the back, taking his head off and having a smoke break.
Yeah.
Right? How disappointing would that be to a child or something? So you only see them with their head on, because they're always creating an experience for people, the product, the brand of Disney. And so if you can help your people get the understanding that, I know maybe you had a bad morning, but maybe Minnie Mouse had one too. But Minnie mm-hmm. Mouse can't take her head off and chew out the little kid. Minnie Mouse can't do this or that. Minnie Mouse has to be Minnie Mouse because it's bigger than her. Mm-hmm. And so when we come into a corporation or a company or real estate, you maybe had a bad morning, but when we get here, we put our head on and we focus, and we're going to create a great experience when people come to church that's different than maybe they've ever had before, because we're all about the same vision, the same direction, the same experience to create a great experience for people. And so we all, know what we're supposed to do. So I think a lot of times that's critical in helping people move forward and having success, is when I'm not there, mm-hmm. because I shouldn't have to be there for church or real estate or whatever to be successful. Mm-hmm. So I think if I'm not there and everything is happening the same and everybody's happy and joyful and I don't have to tell them what to do, then as a leader, I have succeeded, because they already know what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. They can function, and they know the leadership structure that's in place. They don't have to wander around going, hey, where's Pastor Troy, so I can ask him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
To
Absolutely.
me, that's success.
So I a couple things.
Yeah.
Gosh, man, if you were a mid-level leader, that sounds so risky. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's true. I tell people all the time, I have no idea what my schedule is. Mm-hmm. But what's your schedule like? I don't know.
Right.
You got to talk to Alyssa. I've outsourced that part of my brain, because I understand, like, if I hold on to everything, I can't do what I need to do.
True.
So I focus on what is integral for me to do. Mm-hmm. And if everything else needs me, oh man, we're screwed.
Right.
There's another point though you said about keep your head on, and I just as you're saying it, I was thinking, like, there's, if you run into Minnie Mouse at Disneyland, you give her a hug.
Right.
Right. She got a head on. If you run into Minnie Mouse in Times Square, it's a different experience, right?
Yeah.
The costume doesn't make the experience.
That's true.
I mean?
That's true. Yeah.
And
or Vegas.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Oof, I'm not hugging that Minnie Mouse, and
right.
you might see Mickey smoking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
might.
The costume doesn't make the experience, and just because you have the "I'm a leader," doesn't mean that it's being lived out, right?
That's true.
So I don't know. It was something that stuck in my head there. Man.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely. But for me, when I go to Disney World, there's an expectation for these characters that this is what you expect of them, mm-hmm. and so people have an expectation. Of our business. People have an expectation of church. People have an expectation, maybe not voiced, but internally they do. And so we try to, meet what we think that expectation is. So.
All right. Well, Troy, we are at 58 seconds. 58 minutes, pardon me. Let's jump in the lightning round.
Okay.
There you go. So, favorite leadership book?
Who's Holding Your Ladder? Dr. Sam Chand.
Okay. Yep. I've not heard that one before.
Yeah. Well, he's phenomenal.
Okay.
And it's all about, he was painting a building one day, and he looked down and no one was holding his ladder. Mm. And he goes, it's not about how high you can go. It's who's holding your ladder with you. Mm-hmm. In a synopsis. That's kind of what it's
solid.
About. Yep.
I love it. I got to go look that book up. Okay. Most influential mentor.
Yeah, Sam Chand, same guy who wrote the book.
There you go.
He did a bunch of leadership stuff for me years ago, and just deposited some incredible wealth and wisdom into me. So yeah,
very nice. Daily leadership habit, something you would do every day.
Make sure I smile and say hi to everybody in the office. so that you don't create a tense environment that the boss is mad at somebody or something like that, because people read into those things. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's something
Right.
we have this assessment, and it tells you there's something called responsiveness, which is not like I respond to people. It's how I mirror emotion. And I tend to be very low on the responsiveness scale. And I constantly have to remind myself, smile.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't react or
I gotta do
smile,
that too, yeah.
people think you're upset. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm fine. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a funny story. I just
Yeah.
don't laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. And best leadership quote.
Best leadership quote, sweat in preparation so you don't bleed in battle.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you know, who is it?
Well, I don't know if that was his quote or not, but I heard it from him. His name was Blaine Bartell.
Blaine Bartell. Okay.
And this was probably back in the 90s, 1996, 7, 8, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I was at a conference of his, learning how to grow youth, and that was one of his statements. I was like, boom, sweat in preparation so you don't bleed in battle. I still use it today, and I use it with all of our staff.
If you've kept it from the 90s, it definitely is it is definitely your
Right.
quote. Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
man. Very cool.
Because people know when you're bleeding.
Yeah.
And that's generally because we haven't prepared or thought through everything.
Yeah.
Running an event. I mean, church every Sunday is a huge thing you're doing. So making sure everybody's community. So be prepared so you're not bleeding. I forgot to buy cups.
Mm-hmm.
You bled.
Yeah.
You didn't prepare.
Right. And it hurt the experience.
Exactly.
So, okay, Troy, where can people find you online if they wanted you to work with them in real estate? Where would they look for you?
At Troy Shedeed Real Estate.
Okay.
On Instagram and Facebook as well, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Our church, generationschurch.tv.
Yep.
And my golf association, amateurplayerstour.socal on Instagram. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, hey, Troy, when you walked in here, you said that you knew one of my favorite people, Tyler Hungerford.
Yes.
And truly is. And I think for me, it sets the tone because I know where he came from a little bit now. And it's just been a fun conversation, man.
Yeah,
So thank you so much for coming in. I think a lot for people to take away and apply. So thank you so much, man.
Appreciate
it's been
it.
awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Well, hey, Prosperity Collabs, thanks so much for tuning in. Check the notes for the download on today's conversation for any lessons that you can apply in your business, your life, and we'll catch you guys next time.